Recording has begun. Kyle, I'll turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you everyone again if you joined us last week, we focused on read and write and engaging your students with some of the really cool features within read and write. Today, our focus is really on that sort of data-driven instruction and how we can leverage uPar for your student success. So one thing I always like to kind of look at with our lens, at least for our conversation today, is thinking about how uPar can be used in that UDL, that Universal Design for Learning principle, and how we can really use uPar for all of our students to see different things depending on our students' reading comprehension. Love this quote, always love a good quote. This is actually from Dr. Denise DeCoste, who is the founder and creator of uPar. And she is quoted as saying, consistent with the UDL principle of multiple means of expression, uPar was designed to help all students recognize their strengths as readers. So this was really a current quote from her because uPar has gone through a couple different iterations. It was initially intended for students that were below grade level in reading to see if we could get them access to grade level content if we have those read aloud supports available to them. In a more recent update that was done just this last year, it is now, we've expanded that really to all students, and we can really see benefit for all students. And uPar really fits into that UDL and those multiple means of expression through engagement, representation, and action and expression. So it's really presenting that information to students and content in different ways to support their understanding. So that's sort of the lens we're going to have today as we talk about uPar, is how it fits kind of within this UDL principle for all students. So thinking about your students and how it can actually benefit them. So when we think about students, we always have we have our advanced learners. So those could be students that are really reading above their grade level or reading at grade level. Well, with uPar, we can actually give them data that shows how high of grade level content they can understand when they have those supports available. So giving those advanced learners access and showing them that they can access higher level text. For our high anxiety readers, that was definitely me. I was definitely a high anxiety reader growing up as a student. It really gives them confidence in their reading comprehension. So we show them, hey, when you have that text read aloud to you, you can actually understand it a lot better, or maybe even faster when you have those supports as an independent learner. For English language learners, improvements in their comprehension and speed with that read aloud support. So maybe for English language learners, it takes them a long time to actually read a passage independently because they're really hanging on to each word and trying to understand each individual word. Well, with uPar and having that ability to have that read aloud, we can actually also keep track of that time. So we can see our English language learners, we can see the time they spent independently without those supports and the time that they spend with that passage when they have it read aloud and those comprehension questions. And then finally, uPar also aligns itself really nicely with MTSS principles, where we talk about a little bit about that prevention for those struggling readers. It can maybe give us insights into their reading comprehension, but also it's a great early intervention tool. So as you think about an entire classroom of students, we can actually see which students are going to benefit from that support right from the get-go and have those kind of early interventions and those supports and tools for those students. So I know I just kind of jumped in. I am Kyle Krause. I've probably, if you were here last week, you've met me. I am a senior customer success executive here at TechSelf. And really, I support the entire state of Iowa at a statewide level, but also at an individual level. So if you are at a district within Iowa, I am your person. Feel free to reach out to me about any training, implementation, questions, uPar data that you don't know how to read. Feel free to use my email and send me those screenshots, and I'll be able to best assist you. Our objectives for today, and we've actually already covered one. So I wanted to make sure today that we stayed on time. So we've already actually covered number one, just talking a little bit about how uPar aligns with that UDL guidelines, so those multiple means of expression, and how it's really suitable for all students. We can really see interesting data points for all students, whether they are advanced learners, they're at grade level reading, or whether they're below grade level in their independent reading as well. We're also going to take a look at 3 benefits that uPar confirms about a student's reading comprehension and some of the information and data that's going to be found within there. We'll talk a little bit about how to start with analyzing those reports. I know that can always be a challenge is where do I start, Kyle? I have the summary circle, it's got colors, it's got a wheel. Where should I start as I'm actually looking at my students and some of those reports? And then number 4, deciding between, when do I do a do-over? What is a recheck? When should I do a recheck? So thinking a little bit about moving beyond the initial protocol and the data that you get from there and going that next step of, okay, when can I do that do-over? When is a recheck appropriate? And all of those great things. Slide deck has been shared with you, is meant to be used as a resource for us today. So uPar, I always say, stands for the Universal Protocol and Accommodations for Reading. And we're first going to tackle kind of some of those 3 benefits and those really what I call the why of uPar and why uPar can be so beneficial for students. So uPar results can be really used to confirm 3 things. The first being the benefit of text-to-speech, so TTS, to increase a student's reading independence and their ability to access grade level curriculum. So what do we mean by students reading independence? Well, giving them those supports of that text-to-speech, whether that's built into the device itself, whether it's a paid tool that the district is using, or whether you're utilizing Read and Write, which is now being offered to schools that have utilized uPar that don't have that solution. We can also aid in giving you sort of that next step. So really, when we think about uPar, it's going to show whether we can get some of those struggling readers access to that grade level curriculum so that teachers don't have to differentiate too much, and we can keep those students in that least restrictive environment, but just give them those support tools to do that. The second thing that uPar results can be used to confirm is the benefit of text-to-speech of a text reader to increase the speed and efficiency as compared to silent reading. So we've built in some really great time tracking information for each passage that a student will encounter. So we can actually see time information that they spend with the passage. We can also see that time that they spend with those comprehension questions. And where it gets really interesting is when we compare what that student can do with the accommodation and that time information and what they do silently by themselves. So in looking at those time informations, a lot of times we see students are much faster, sometimes twice as fast when they have those text-to-speech or those text readers available to them compared to what they can do actually independently. And then finally, uPar can be used to confirm the benefit of text-to-speech as an accommodation for a student to help them improve comprehension over time. And that's a little bit about what we'll talk about later on with those rechecks, where we're not just doing that initial assessment where we get that data, but we can then do some of those kind of quick rechecks to actually check to see if that text-to-speech reader is actually making progress in getting that student closer to grade level material over time. So really thinking just beyond that initial data sample and being able to recheck throughout the school year. We'll go ahead and we'll jump into kind of some different data reports. So really what I'm hoping to do here is kind of where should we get started and which students should we get started with. So as you're looking at that group data, so you have your students on your educator dashboard. The first thing you'll see when you get to those reports is you'll see this summary circle. There's a lot of colors, there's a lot of verbiage. We'll talk a little bit about each of them more in depth. But as you are starting, I always recommend that you start with these 2 colors on that color wheel. And these are going to be these 2 recommendations of exceeded grade level and got to grade level. Students that fall within those 2 recommendation categories are students that show the greatest benefit when they have that read aloud support versus what they can do independently. And we'll actually look at some reports here to show you that. So this is a great place to start with those exceeded grade level students and got to grade level students, because those are the ones who show the greatest benefit with that read aloud support versus what they can do independently. So when you actually go ahead and select those students, again, they'll be color coded by their name. So again, here we're going to start with exceeded grade level students and those students that got to grade level, and we'll look a little bit about what that data means for them. So for students that exceeded grade level, and for all of these slides, I've also included some tips along the bottom. So as you come back to this resource, just check out that tip section there. That'll be a great resource for you as you're sort of going through. If you're looking at reports or going back to look at reports, I kind of give some tips about how to understand students that fall within these different recommendations. So exceeded grade level students, as you can see here, this is a sixth grade student. I can look at the little face icon. That's that student's current grade level. And here I can see that this student, when they have that accommodation, so that text-to-speech read aloud support, we can actually see that this student can actually get up to that ninth grade level where they're actually really understanding what the material that's being read to them, versus look at what they can do independently, only answering 22% of those comprehension questions correctly. And so that's why I say students that fall in this category and the next category we look at, this is where you'd want to have those data conversations where you actually show the student their report and say, wow, look at what you can do when you have that text read aloud to you versus what you can do independently. Also, I've worked with a lot of districts that are starting now to really share this with parents as well, because they like to see this. And it shows how they can help their child at home, right, by allowing some of those different supports and tools to aid in that reading comprehension. So that's an exceeded grade level. That's what one would look like. This would be got to grade level. Looks very sort of similar, but in this one, you can see maybe the student only got to actually the grade level that they were at and being successful with that accommodation. So again, this would be a sixth grade student who is showing really great benefit from having that text read aloud versus what they can do independently. So again, you have that tip section there that kind of just gives you a little bit more information. This would be a student that you'd want to do that kind of recheck with, because it would actually check them at the last point they were successful, so that over the course of the year, we can see, okay, they can actually get even higher grade level content when they have that read aloud to them under those terms. So actually looking at interpreting data, so that's kind of where to start. So starting with those students that show the greatest benefit with text-to-speech versus what they can do independently. When looking at those individual data reports, one thing to always remember is within your educator dashboard, when you're looking at that student report, there's more information hidden under each one of those cells. So each of those cells represents how the student performed on those passages. And the percentages just mean that's how many correct they got on those comprehension questions. So underneath there is where you'll get a little bit more detailed information, including the name of the passage. You get the title. You'll see TTS for text to speech. You'll see HR for a human reader if that was found to be beneficial. You'll also see the genre along again with that reading time and that quiz time. So that's where that time piece comes in there, where you can see how much time that student spent with the reading passage versus that quiz passage. And that's when it becomes really interesting when you look at what that student can do then independently when you start to look at some of that time information. When reading a uPar protocol, always important, number one, to start with that current grade level. That's going to be that little face icon. That is where students will actually start at grade level. And then number two, the first passage will always be text to speech. So that first passage will be at grade level and will always be at text to speech. Depending on how that student does, either number 3 or 4 would be true about the way that uPar would operate next. So if that student was successful at that first grade level passage, as in the first example, then we will continue one grade level higher and continue with text to speech at that next level. So that's that first graphic up there, a third grade student who scored 100% at the third grade level with text to speech. And so there we went up to the fourth grade level along those lines. If the student was unsuccessful, however, at grade level, as the below graphic shows, that's where we'll actually go down one grade level. And at that level, at the one grade level below, is where we actually give them that human reader. So that human reader, it's very similar as like to an audiobook. So it's it's a recording of an actor reading with more inflection tone. So we're seeing if maybe a more natural sounding voice benefits that student's listening comprehension. But also in the human reader, we take away the highlighting of each word that you would have in text to speech. So you'd also lose that aspect when you go to that human reader. Once that read aloud support has found to be successful, that's where number 5 then comes into play. They receive that independent reading or silent reading at that same level where their listening comprehension was found to be successful. So again, in that below graphic, you have that 6th grade student who was successful at the 4th grade level, hitting 75% correct on those comprehension questions. So there is where we give them that silent reading passage at that independent level to show what they can do without those supports. So this uPar is not meant to give a child an independent reading score or a Lexile score by any means. We only give them that independent score as that baseline compared to what they can do successfully with that accommodation. So I just wanted to quickly highlight, if you didn't know how, this is sort of kind of the best steps to kind of reading and understanding a uPar report. I'm going to stop right there. I don't know if there's any questions. I'm going to just take a drink though. Always checking my time. I think we're
I
okay.
don't see any questions in the chat, so keep, oh,
Okay.
there was one.
TTS,
Yeah.
yes. Text to speech. Yep, great question. All right, for our next section, so I'm going to go through just sort of some different report examples that you can see as you're actually getting those reports. I think the one thing is we talk about how to read it, this, and the other thing. Sometimes when you have so many different, students that fall under different recommendations of things, it's kind of hard to understand what each of those means. So I'm going to go through some of these examples with you. And again, you have those tips underneath about kind of how to best interpret and make those next steps. So UDL. So if a student falls within that kind of pinkish purple color, UDL just stands for Universal Design for Learning. And I don't love this recommendation. We're going to be changing this. So this title will be changing. But what we're talking about here are students that are at grade level already reading independently, but with the support of having the text read aloud, can actually also understand even higher grade level content. The reason we say UDL is because UDL is about, really giving the right tools to the right students and making sure that, we give students available all of the tools and they use the ones independently that they need fit. So students that fall in this category, independently are fine to read it on their own, but with that support of a read aloud can also understand even higher grade level, content. So this is going to be really great. I was a former teacher myself, and I always was like, how do I challenge my, my advanced learners, my high flyers? Like, how do I actually challenge them? We can give them harder level context, but sometimes it's hard to know, like, if I give them harder level material, are they going to actually be able to understand it, right? I know they're reading at grade level independently. So this will actually, these students that fall in this category, we can, with this data say, okay, with this support, you're actually able to understand at about 9th or 10th grade level. We can offer that support. We can show those tools. And then it really helps make the classroom, it really, takes away that text to speech is a crutch or is an aid for students, because all of our students are really using it when they need it. So UDL just standing for those students that really are at grade level reading, but with those supports can access even higher grade level content. Students that fall in that above independent reading level. So these are going to be students that are not quite at getting to grade level with that accommodation, but they're at least able to hit that threshold of success at a grade level that's a little bit lower than their current grade level. So these are really interesting students to me, because a lot of times these could be students that haven't had any experience with a text-to-speech reader. And so maybe over time, they would actually benefit greatly from that support to get them at least to grade level understanding. And so these would be the students that we would want to really give those rechecks to, probably like in that 6 to 8 week period, to see if we can if that support is helping them gain access to that grade level material. So it's kind of that orangish yellowish color on your wheel, but this above independent reading level is a really interesting category because like I said, it's not to say we're going to give this sixth grade student here fourth grade level material. That's not what we're saying, but we're saying, wow, look at what they can do versus what they can do independently. And that maybe over time they would be able to make some really great gains. So each report just can have so much nuances and so much interesting things about them. Time benefit. So these are really interesting because these are going to be students grade level. It could be at grade level, could even be below grade level with time benefit, but they're at that same level. They are successful with the accommodation, so having that text read aloud, but they're also successful independently. The key here is looking at that time information. So if you look here, I have a little arrow pointing to it. You can see up top at grade 6, so this is that sixth grade student, independently, they're about 11 minutes and 59 seconds. With the accommodation, so with that text-to-speech accommodation, they're actually, right, they're 2 times as fast, being able to have that read to them and answer those comprehension questions. So that's where that time benefit really comes into play. You will see that time benefit if they are 10% or more faster with the accommodation. That's where that time benefit will come into play. But when you have a student like this who's twice as fast with that accommodation, that's a really interesting point to say, okay, you're independently, you're there, accommodation, like with that read aloud support, you're there, but you're so much more faster when you have that support. So a little bit of that efficiency piece built in there as well. Our no benefit students, they can look really a multitude of ways. So they can really look a lot of different ways. This would actually be an example of a student who actually is at the same level at the accommodation as they are independently, but they're actually a little bit faster with the independent. So there's no necessarily a benefit to their reading comprehension. So I always say uPar is going to tell you those students that just prefer to do it independently, and they can actually understand the text better when they do it independently. So it's going to show you those students as well. So these are always ones that trip people up because I'm like, I see green, but it says no benefit. Yep, that's because the benefit is really independently they can understand it either a little bit better or even faster than having that accommodation. Another one, no benefit. This is an example of a high school student. If you do high school, we do actually skip grades. You'll notice in this report, we're skipping some grades here. That's not a flaw in the system. That's designed that way. With high school students, we want to see if we can hit any point of success. So as they're working their way down, if they're not hitting like a grade level below, we'll skip a grade, we'll skip 2 grades to see if we can find that point of success for that student. You'll also notice there's no independent. Where's the independent score? This student, because they did not hit that 75% threshold, they would not receive an independent reading passage because again, uPar is only there to show what can I do with that accommodation versus what I cannot do. So if we don't find where they're successful, there's really no point in giving them that independent passage along those lines. Benefit no 3, always show this one if you see a student where it kind of started off okay and then it just kind of dives off here. Always check that time information because we know our students. I remember my students, you get those ones that click through, maybe they're not in the right mindset, and we can find that out in that time information. And so that's where we want to make sure that we have the best data sample when looking at those reports. So check out that time information for those students to make sure that they stayed on task. When we look at do-overs and quick checks, so again, this would be assuming that we've already done our initial protocol and we want our students to either maybe do over the entire protocol again or do that quick recheck. So after you've done that initial uPar, you're going to go back, have that student go back to startpar.com, and you're going to see this prompt on the screen, and it's going to say, you've taken uPar in the past. Would you like to take it again or do that quick recheck? So they have 2 options here to do that quick recheck or that do-over. Do-over will run them through that entire protocol again. So a few instances you might consider. So again, if that student did not take the protocol seriously, as indicated by that time, we probably want them to do over that protocol to get a better data sample for them. Again, if the student went through the protocol very quickly If the student was visibly frustrated during the protocol, that would probably be a time to select doing over that do-over. I will say I've had teachers before do do-overs at the end of the year. So as kind of like a final, like full uPar analysis, you could do a do-over at the end of the year if you want to also get that independent score. So that's something else to consider as that teacher is like, okay, we've done the initial, we'll talk about rechecks here in a second, but then I can do a do-over at the end of the year as sort of kind of that final uPar data set for the end of the year to see where they ended up and also get that independent score again. So something to consider doing a do-over at the end of that year. That quick check, so that's going to allow that student to start where they last left off and check for comprehension one grade level higher than they were successfully previously. So quick rechecks, it's only going to be the accommodation part, only about 5 to 10 minutes to run through a quick recheck because we're only going to use the accommodation passages. We're not going to check independent with quick checks. And again, with quick checks, it's really great for those students that we want to see if they're making progress towards understanding, getting closer to grade level content. Now I can see I've initiated my MacBook. If you have a MacBook, you know how you have like the different animations in the back. I just activated the fireworks. So if you were looking, you saw some fireworks on my screen. So again, so for students that fall, like let's say in that UDL category, right, where they're super high flyers, there's probably no need for a quick check, right? We've already found that they can actually understand even higher grade level content when they have it read to them. Probably there's going to be no benefit to do that quick check for them. But for those students where we really want to check over time, are they making progress? Just build those into kind of that cadence for the year of like, okay, 6 to 8 weeks. Let's do that quick check, see if we're making progress with that over time. The great thing about any do-overs or any rechecks, they save within that student's data sample. We are working on ways of making this data even better and maybe even archiving year over year. Because I know right now, if you have a student that has been doing uPar for a while, is a lot of data. So we are working on making that a little bit better so that year over year we can see students and how they're progressing within that uPar in their data set. uPar timeline, I just always like to highlight these are just some of the different things that you need to consider as you're going to either administer uPar for the first time or just thinking about, what are the steps that are involved. So it's identifying those students. So again, you can do a whole group of students, you can do a whole classroom. The great thing is you all should have access to a uPar license through your AEA. And those are unlimited license. So we can add a domain to that license where your students can just all have access to take uPar through their email domain as well. So identifying students should not be the hardest part. Maybe picking a date and time would be the second thing to consider. Any gen ed classroom typically would suffice for this, even if it's not a whole class doing it. This is not a high stakes exam, just a quiet distraction-free environment typically works best. Set off that time, 15 to 20 minutes to administer a uPar protocol. I will say if you do an entire class, those students that are your really advanced learners or high readers, it will prompt them. It'll ask them, do you want to keep going? So if students say yes, say I want to keep going, as some of those high achievers can be, it could take longer than 20 minutes. So always set like a little time limit for yourself that like no more than 30 minutes is where we'll cap this off for our students. Interpreting that data, having those student data talks is obviously really important, especially for those students that we said show the greatest benefit that exceeded or got to grade level by that recommendation, and then doing those quarterly rechecks for progress. So doing those quick rechecks throughout the year to see if we're making progress with that. We got a link here to our uPar Learning Academy, where we've got just a lot of different resources. I've also included my favorite one, which is our uPar student video. You can access it through that Learning Academy link, or it's just simply here for you. It's also found on YouTube. Great way to introduce new teachers, new staff to what uPar is. Also really great for your students. But I always like to learn about new things, like I'm 5 years old or like I'm a fifth grader. So that's why I love this video for anyone who's new to uPar. So we are coming up on our time. So hopefully what I hope you learned from today is how uPar aligns with those UDL guidelines, and it's really suitable for all students. You can really find really great information for all students. The three benefits that we talked about, how uPar can be used to confirm things for your students' reading comprehension, some of those initial steps, so how to begin. So starting with those students that got to grade level or exceeded grade level, I think are a great place to start and having those data conversations with. And then checking for progress over time. So doing that do-over possibly at the end of the year for all your students to get that final uPar check for the year and doing those rechecks throughout. Thank you all so much. It is 12:30. There is my information. Please reach out to me about any questions. If you're seeing, some reports you need help on, send me screenshots. Just don't include student's name, and I'll be happy to help.
Thanks, Kyle. We appreciate having you. Again, I put the link in the chat to the document that will house the recording when I get that, and Kyle's resources. His contact information is there. And if you have questions about getting access to the uPar, again, reach out to your AEA. So everybody stay
Thank you.
warm and have a great day, and hopefully we'll see some of you next week.
Yep. Stay safe, everyone.
Bye all.
Bye.